My Gavanen Melonin, and well met indeed. I am Arachir Galadirthan, the head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer. Welcome back to a developer diary / submod video. Now, the things that you are about to see over the course of the next however long this video ends up being are not present in version 2.2 unless you download the submod. So this is not a faction overview. I cannot stress that enough. This is not how your units will look unless you download the submod. These units will be present in the next version of Divide and Conquer, which will probably be called version, I don't know, 4, 5, 3. We've never settled on a name. But anyway, this is just a developer diary, but Hummingbird has also released everything I'm going to show you here as a submod. There will be a link in the description below to that. It will install in slightly different method to the submods, the way that the official, if you will, submods install, and I'll cover that at the very end. So that'll be at the final part. There is no campaign aspect to this. This is purely a battle change to the dwarves. So to give it then an overview and to talk about the actual thing, Hummingbird has been developing what he's called the Dwarven Overhaul project. He started work on this mentally many months ago, but he didn't want to start any actual work on it till after 2.2 released. That point obviously is upon us, and he's rapidly got all of his changes into action. And the goal is to differentiate the three Dwarven nations further, so they have more standout roles. This means that some units have been cut, some units have been changed, certain factions get things that other factions maybe don't get, some units have been completely overhauled. So some people may dislike some bits and like others. Allow me to say from the outset, there are no mounted dwarves. You're never going to get goat riders, chariots, weird ballaster bolts that destroy arrows in the air. You're never going to get any of that nonsense whilst I sit in the Arainior Ihudol DaC chair. So, we shall start with Erebor, as you may have guessed from the units before you. So a brief rundown then. Erebor have been changed so that they now typically have the highest melee attack and the highest charge of all three Dwarven nations. However, they pay for this by having slightly lower defense. So they are now the aggressive dwarves, if you will. And that is reflected in their units' stats. They have now got 3 units of axe throwers, which is group number 1 that I've listed here. So you've got the default Erebor axe throwers, who remain the same as they were before. That's them on the right unupgraded, and the left is upgraded, and that pattern will be the same throughout the entire video. So when you upgrade them at a blacksmith, they will then upgrade to look like that. These are Erebor axe throwers. They're the tier 1 axe throwing unit. Then in the second stage, the crossbowmen have been removed, and they have been replaced with these, King's Warriors. They are just axe throwers again. They're reasonably good melee troops when they have finished throwing their axes, but they are axe throwers. And then finally, the Axe Guard of Erebor have been given throwing axes as well. So the elite Axe Guard of Erebor, they're just a very elite, aggressive late-game strike infantry. Otherwise, they are unchanged, except they now also throw axes. And there they are with their two-handed weapons on their backs. You'll note that they get a visual upgrade as well from right to left. Unfortunately, the grass is quite long, so you can't really see very well. I should probably turn the grass off, really, shouldn't I? But they upgrade to look like that, which is quite nice. However, this comes at a cost. Erebor can no longer train archers outside of the Orocani. So the Dwarven Traveller unit is no longer available to Erebor, and they've lost their crossbow unit, as I say. So you no longer have any range except for the Orocani units, and that comes in the form of Stiffbeard archers, as seen here, and Blacklock crossbowmen. But there's also, as I have mentioned at the start, visual enhancements throughout on the board, sorry. Visual enhancements throughout, full stop. So the Stiffbeard Scouts have been given a new look that you can see there. Hummingbird has tried to infuse a more eastern vibe into the Orocani units because that's where they come from. So rather than just making them look like clones of Erebor or clones of the Longbeards, who are essentially most of the remaining dwarves in Middle-earth are of the Longbeard clan, Durin's clan, Of course, the Broadbeams and Firebeards, whilst we name them and we give nods to them, they are supposedly mostly all dead. So it's only the Longbeards. And so we wanted to make the Oricani, or Hummingbird wanted to make the Oricani look different. So they have a bit more of an Eastern theme. So there's Stiffbeard Archers, and standing behind them are the new Blacklock Engineers. Still with their wonderful Pavis shield, and a cool little helmet with feathers on now. But their armour is a bit lighter, a bit more reminiscent of, I don't know, Parthia probably would be, is what these remind me of. The Parthian archers from Rome 1. But the change in look applies throughout. So Stonefoot Spearmen, who are also now part of the, who are now one of the Oricani units, who have remained, sorry. They also have that Eastern theme, seen very much with their shields as well. But they're still very much dwarves. They're not as tall as humans, and they talk like dwarves. Or they talk in a Scottish accent, but they've got a bit more of an Eastern theme. And then finally there is another change in that the Oricani nobles have been done away with, and they are now called Iron Fist Hammers. They have the same look, they have very similar battle system, I believe. They've got a shield on their back, two-handed hammer, their armour piercing, very elite shock infantry, but they're now called Iron Fist Hammers. And the final unit that you can see listing over here, standing all on its own, are the Oricani Warriors. They're under Erebor at the moment, but you can't actually recruit these, but they're part of the overhaul, so I've added them in. This is the unit that Canned gets if it sides with the Blue Wizards. It is unique to Canned. Erebor cannot train this unit, and they're just called Oricani Warriors, to reflect the fact that all of the Oricani has come with the Blue Wizards to support Canned. Or to support the Blue Wizards who indirectly take over Canned. So the Oricani Warriors are now a Candish-only Dwarven unit, and they have a bit of a Candish vibe throughout their design as well. So very similar to the now base design of the Stiffbeards and the Stonefoots, in that kind of chainmail look. But they gain additional designs throughout. So the Oricani Warriors not available to Erebor anymore. That's why they're not in any of these groups. Another change I just wanted to show you was, these may be in 2.2, but I couldn't quite recall. But of course the Royal Guard now blend in with their nation a little bit better. They have slightly higher quality models. And the Iron Guard now have the elite look of most of your lower tier units. So when your lower tier units are upgraded to their full extent, they look similar now to the Iron Guard. You will also be pleased to note that the Axe Slayers of Ered Mithrin are now effective against armour, as it should be, as it should have been from the outset. They are effective against armour. So that's Erebor in a nutshell. They're aggressive, they lose, they're the best attack and the best charge at each tier for their units, or on average, but they have the worst defence and worst armour stats now. Or they have lower armour and lower defensive stats, not necessarily the worst. They also are not really a ranged nation, focusing instead, again, on aggression, up-close melee, and throwing axes into the faces of their enemies, with 3 units now throwing axes, which makes it even more important that you sort out your axe throwers. I should probably release a video that explains exactly how to fix axe throwers, just for that purpose. And I was thinking I might tag it onto the end of this one, but I won't. I'll do a dedicated how to fix your axe throwers video, because we get asked it all the bloody time. Anyway, so that is Erebor. They're now the aggressive dwarves, as I say, and those are the changes that come for them. So next we shall move on to Casas Doom. So, Casas Doom. Casas Doom have been edited to be the nation of defense. They have the highest armor and shield stats of all 3 dwarven nations. So Erebor have low defense skill and low armor, or lower armor and lower defense. Casas Doom have higher armor and higher shield, making them defensive. But their defense skill is not anything particularly to sing about. It's the armor and the shield that has been raised. However, they pay for this in that not only is their charge now the worst of any nation because they're bloody heavy and it's difficult to run with a lot of armour on, but they are also now the slowest dwarves in the game, and arguably the slowest units in the game. Most dwarven units now run 10% slower than the normal running speed of Medieval 2. To put it into perspective, in the base game, 100% is normal running speed. Almost all humans and orcs have that. Elves run at 105% and dwarves used to run at 95%. Kassadin now run at 90%, meaning they are very slow. Except for the Hithaiglir Beast Hunters and the Dwarven Travellers, who both run at 100%. So your chasing down the enemy unit is now also your ranged unit. But that brings me straight on to Casas Doom have archers. And they only have one axe-throwing unit, which is present on that left-hand side, the Casas Doom Reclaimers. Otherwise, they have 2 archer units, and so you actually get range. The Kassadin sentries, pikes, are no longer really that prevalent in Kassadin, whereas they were before, and to reflect that, the sentries, one of the first tier units that you get, they now have a spear and a shield, and no longer do they have a pike. In a similar vein, much of Kassadin's units have been changed to use two-handed axes, or axes in general, to using hammers. So it just, again, gives a visual flavour between the nations. So their armour-piercing units now tend to wield hammers rather than axes. And that's present here with the Legion Hammer Guard, who used to be called the Legion Axe Guard. And there's their upgrades on the right-hand side. You will also note from these 3 units over here that the base look of the Legion units, so any unit that's Legion X, so Legion Hammer Guard, Legion Deeping Guard, Legion Shield Guard, they all now have a unique unupgraded look that you can see is partially chainmail, and some of them just have tabards over their chainmail, I assume anyway. But and then they upgrade to look like those heavily armoured warriors there on the left. So there's some visual changes for Kassadin. I've already mentioned the Hithaiglir Beast Hunters now run very, very quickly at 100%, or as normal at normal speed, but they no longer have armor-piercing arrows. So they are just good archers now, but they're not incredible archers anymore. They're no longer armor-piercing, which cuts them down a little bit. Their size has been slightly increased as a battalion as a whole, and they can now be trained everywhere as well. They're no longer restricted to, I believe it was mountains before. The appearance of the Reclaimers has now been made to look the same as the Guardians. So Guardians and Reclaimers now look basically identical. But you'll note that the Guardians do still have an axe, but the Reclaimers have a two-handed hammer when they have finished throwing axes. They are an axe thrower unit predominantly, and then they are aggressive flank infantry after that with a two-handed hammer. And finally, Balin's Guard also has an unupgraded unique look, which Hummingbird describes as a random mashup of parts from Eredluin and Erebor elite units. So you'll note in there's some Eredluin Axe Slayers of Ered Mithrin, or Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin, sorry. I called them Axe Slayers earlier, I think, didn't I? And there are units in there that I believe are the Tamunzahar Nobles, or the Gabilgathol Guard of Eredluin. But so that unupgraded look kind of reflects the fact that Balin's expedition represents the interests of all dwarves. But then when they're upgraded in the highest tier blacksmith in Kassadin itself, they upgrade to a unified look representing their new nation. I also want to take this opportunity, because I forgot to mention it in the Erebor one, and I'm mentioning it now, that the banner carriers have been updated. Some of you will not have missed that, I doubt. Or many of you will have spotted that already, that the banners now are actually unique to each nation. So unless the unit is shared between the nations, then it's difficult. You have to do some black magic with the banners. Oh no, you don't actually, as long as the banner carrier man is the same. Yeah, no, sorry, ignore that. So Kassadin's banner is now grey, Eredluin's is blue, and Erebor's is red. But it fits in absolutely perfectly, doesn't it? It just completely fits the vibe of the nation. Black and silver. Which runs through the entire colour scheme of Kassadin. So that's Kassadin. They are now defensive. They have lost their pikes, apart from the First Legion. You still get First Legion. The elite get the elite tier pike unit, but otherwise you don't get pikes early on. But then overall defence of the nation has risen. So they are a defensive faction, but they are now very slow, which is why, obviously, your archers now have an even bigger role to play. But then we shall head over now and discuss the last of the dwarves, Eredluin. So, to Eredluin then. Eredluin have been completely changed from the ground up. A lot of name changes, a lot of unit skill changes. profession changes. And they have been made overall the weakest Dwarven faction. Now, Hummingbird does stress in his little description that they are still dwarves and they are still strong, but of the three Dwarven nations, they are now offensively and defensively the weakest. This is an attempt to show the fact that Ered Luin, at least in the Third Age, is the least militaristic Dwarven nation of them all. Kassadin obviously set out on an expedition, took back Moria for quite some time. I think it's about 10, 15 years? I can't really remember. Anyway, before they died, so they were obviously embroiled in war for a while. Erebor is at constant war and is indeed attacked in the Third Age by the forces of Rune. They're attacked in the Battle of Five Armies, and before that, the War of the Dwarves and Orcs. Ered Luin hasn't played a part in a war in the Third Age since the War of the Dwarves and Orcs, which was many, many years ago. They are a peaceful Dwarven nation, and the quintessential hiding in their mountains seeking riches Dwarven nation. So they are the worst overall. Worst attack, worst defense, worst charge. However, they have a few things that make them stand out. Chief amongst them is their, dare I say, cowardly tactics in light of this lack of war. They are now a crossbow and pike nation. I'm not suggesting at all that crossbows are cowardly, of course. Well, I am. No, I'm not. I jest. But they're the nation that now sums up not being warfare based. They don't have the time to train their peoples to fire bows, so they've given them all crossbows instead. But this is the basic overview of Ered Luin. So when you start off in the lower tiers now, you've got Ered Luin Militia and Ered Luin Pikemen. So those are your two first starter units, and they're supported by a starter crossbow unit. What used to be archers are now crossbows, and of course therefore are effective against armour. Under the law of divide and conquer. They also have a cool design on their shields. And there is the Ered Luin banner carrier as well. As I say, it's blue, and it has the famous mask of Ered Luin, or probably the mask of Azagal, I'm not really sure. Then when you come up to the second tier, you've got Clan Guard Swordmen. No longer are they called Nogrod Swordmen. I shan't lie to you, I don't know why their name was changed from Nogrod to Clan Guard, but there we are, it was. So they're Clan Guard Swordmen now instead of Nogrod Swordmen, and they have a slightly different... a bit more of a blue vibe, and they are also supported by Clan Guard Phalanx, so a mainstream pike unit, the Phalanx. They are then also supported by Clan Guard Crossbows, taking their crossbows to their second tier as well. So you've got a pike and a crossbow unit for your militia and your mainstream. When we then jump up to your Elita units, they have been redesigned visually and redesigned in purpose. So the Gabilgathol used to be Hammer Guard, are now the Gabilgathol Guard, and they are a sword and shield unit. They are very similar to Iron Guard, but they are worse. They are supported by the new design for the Azagal's Tomb Protectors, who look like very royal and regal. They look much better. They look like the kind of unit that would be protecting one of the most famous dwarven warriors of all time. Azagal. They inspire your troops and they are effective against armour, just heavy axe-wielding monsters. A unit, however, that I glossed over, and which we'll come back to now because we're talking about the AORs, is that the Ered Luin nation now has use of two major AOR units that it didn't before. And they are the Firebeard Warriors and the Broadbeam Marksmen. So the Firebeard Warriors are an early tier, aggressive, two-handed armour piercer. So effective against armour, attack 6, 5 charge, 15 defense. They're kind of like early tier berserkers for the dwarves, very susceptible to arrow fire. Now these are only available in the mountains, the Blue Mountains themselves, and a couple of the lower lying regions, the foothills of the Blue Mountains. And it's the same for the Broadbeam Marksmen. But Broadbeam Marksmen have the accolade, according to Hummingbird, of now being the most damaging and longest range crossbow unit in the game. So they are the most effective crossbow unit in Divide and Conquer now. They also have the ability to hide anywhere. He's taken the idea of human rangers, applied it to the dwarves, and then given them crossbows, basically. So they're a crossbow ranger unit. So they're very, very effective ranged, but they are restricted, along with the Firebeards, to only the Blue Mountains. So do take note of that. There's also a slight change, starting with the Tumunzahar Nobles. they no longer have the large two-handed hammer that they had before, and instead now have a two-handed sword. So, reflecting that, I don't know, a sword is surely easier to use than a hammer. A hammer takes a lot of time to get used to the swing, whereas a sword I feel like you could blunder your way through a bit more, because if the enemy just runs into it, they've impaled themselves. I'm not really too sure. But anyway, they now use two-handed swords rather than hammers. And finally, I just wanted to show you that if you get Casdim Guardians as not Casas Doom, they still have their golden design. So they are only silver when Casas Doom recruit them. And when Erebor and Ered do, they have their golden design. And as you can see, they also have a blue shield when recruited by Ered, and they have a silver shield when recruited by Casas Doom, and I assume they probably have a red one when recruited by Erebor, because that's the same shield used for all three nations, just coloured differently, which is a very nifty tactic. And I applaud you for that, Hummingbird. That's cool. So that's Ered now in a nutshell. They are not particularly aggressive, and they rely on pikes and crossbows to do the damage. Their mainline units are the worst of all and any Dwarven units. But I stress, they are still Dwarven units. They will still get ridiculous death tallies, or kill counts, sorry, and they will murder almost anything that comes into their path. They are still very effective, but they are now the worst of the Dwarven nations. So that is the Grand Dwarven Overhaul. And this, as I say, is a submod that you can get access to on Total War Center, and you can download it and copy it into your into wherever you've got Third Age installed, which I'll show you in just a moment. Do take note that this submod was not just created by Hummingbird, and there were additions, and we must thank Celtic Magister for the banners, for he created the 3 banners and Hummingbird added them in. Celtic Magister also created the look, I believe, for the Azagald's Tomb Protectors. So they were created by Celtic Magister and not by Hummingbird, from what I can gather. Yes, is it those I'm thinking of? The Oricani unit for Cand was also created by Celtic Magister and not by Hummingbird. So there's that as well. We also have to thank Black Goldfish. Sorry, it was Black Goldfish. Black Goldfish created the Azagald's Tomb Protectors, and he also created the new design for the Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin. Celtic Magister created the banners and the Oricani, the new look for the Oricani Warrior unit. And Lord of Links wrote most of the descriptions for most of the Ered units, but you'll have to download the submod to read those. I won't pause and show you all of them. And Fire Dragon created the large UI, which is this image here. We call this the big UI, and we call the one in the bottom left of your screen your small UI. Those are the colloquial names that modders give those images. But that's it. So that's the overhaul in full. As I say, this will be a part of any future release of Divide and Conquer, so if you don't like it, do get into discussing it, and we can look at changing some things up. But I implore you to at least download it and give it a go. It is a submod, as I say. If you want to have this installed and the Total War submod installed, you merely just have to install the Total War one second. This overwrites one of the files of the Total War mod, but it's a very minor change. So if you install this first and then install the Total War submod, then you can have them both together. And speaking of installation, I'll just do a brief little bit on how to install this submod if you are hoping to. Okay, so you've downloaded the Dwarven Overhaul project and you've very sensibly put it onto your very clean desktop that has no icons on it whatsoever because order is truth. And you've extracted it to the same location so that you can find it very easily. And then you've opened it, and inside you will either have extracted it just here, either extract here or extract to. I always extract to. It's a habit of mine. Many people just extract here. If you extract to, then you get that folder, as I've already shown you, which within has a data folder. So this doesn't have an installer. It is a copy and paste job. What you need to do is navigate to wherever you've got the Third Age that you want to install it. For me, it's C, Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Med2, Mods, Third Age, DaC, and there's my data folder. You could be any of the other ones. I mean, these for me are actual expansions. If I loaded that up, it would play the Americas expansion because that's the best way of installing mods. Anyway, so I would go to where I've got it installed, and all you need to do is either right-click it and copy down the bottom, left-click it and press Ctrl-C if you're unfamiliar with that, or even just drag and drop Although, there we are, if I can finally get my mouse to work. And it will move the items over. And then it will ask you to replace. And you want to say yes. You need to replace because it is a replacer. And it obviously is a mod of files that are already in existence. So you have to replace the existing mods. Now, as I say, if you do that one first and then install the Total War submod, although it's paused for some reason. There we are. If you do that first and then install the Total War submod, you can have both at the same time. Otherwise, if you installed the Total War submod first, then install the Dwarven Overhaul submod, then reinstall the Total War one, and it will all work fine. And that's it. So that is how to install it, what it does, and just be advised, it will be in the next version of Divide and Conquer. So, I hope you've learned something from today. I hope it's been enjoyable. There won't be the Erebor faction overview today. That will be next weekend. So for now, until we speak again, dear friends, Nivar na den Peramad Melonin, and farewell.